thing in the chat to let us know.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone to our March SVAC meeting. We're going to get started with some introductions, and I think what we'll do is we'll start in the room and then we'll go through everybody who's online. Before we get too far in this, I do want to say that there was a little bit of a mix-up this morning, and there are folks who were in Salem at 8 a.m. And so they're all on their way here. And so we'll have some additional people joining us here in Forest Grove when they get here from Salem. So, and some of them are presenting. So if we need to move some things around in the agenda to make sure that we don't move things forward until they're here. But I think we're going to be okay right now. Everybody who's presenting before 10 is already in the room. So I think we're all right. So why don't we'll go around and introduce ourselves. My name is Denise Lothman. I'm the SVAC chair, and I am the executive director of the Columbia River Estuary Study Task Force, or CREST for short. And Don, why don't we start with you and we'll go around this way.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Don Everingham, ODF Northwest Oregon Area Director and one of the co-conveners for SVAC.
Folks, Dan Goody, Astoria District 4.
Good morning, Barrett Brown, motorized and other recreation group representative. How many other positions should we include in our presentation?
Whichever ones you want.
Just a citizen. Just in science.
You just sat down and you're just in time to introduce yourself.
Perfect. Amanda Sullivan Astor, Forest Policy Manager, Associated Oregon Loggers. Thanks. Yeah.
Good morning, Matt Thomas, the current acting district forester for West Oregon District.
Good morning, I'm Nick Polisato. I'm the Deputy Division Chief for State Forests and co-convener with Don.
Why don't we do you guys in the back too?
Morning, Dexter, a wildlife biologist for ODF, North Cascade, West Oregon Forest Grove.
Tyson Weppert. I work in Salem for ODF State Forest. I'm the adaptive management specialist.
Good morning, Chuck Beeling. I work out of Western Lane in Veneta for ODF, Assistant District Forester.
Good morning, Jeff Peck, Marketing Unit Forester here in Forest Grove District.
Ty Koppel, Boise Cascade, out of Willamina.
Great. That'd be two back there.
Seamus Smith, NRS1, Marketing, Forest Grove.
Colton Turner, NRS1 Marketing, Forest Grove.
Or Hampton.
Good morning, everyone. Cody Valencia, the State Forest Unit Forester for the West Oregon District.
Morning, Derek Bangs, Operations Specialist, ODF.
Morning, Joe Offer, Recreation Education Interpretation Program Manager.
Good morning, my name is Kyle Kopp. I'm the St. Am Unit Forester out of North Cascade District with ODF.
All right, we got everybody here in the room. So with that, we'll go ahead and move to the screen. Let's go with Cheryl.
Good morning, everybody. Cheryl Nelson from Southern Oregon, the Illinois Valley Fire Resiliency Oversight Group. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Justin.
Good morning, Justin Buttress, Policy Analyst in the State Forest Division.
All right. Doug.
Doug.
Okay, how about Griffin Beach? Jeff Smith?
It's Mommy.
Jeff here with Interforce.
Thank you. Colleen?
Might be driving. I think she's on the road.
Zach Lee? Leslie?
Hi, I'm here. Non-affiliated. Good morning, everybody.
Lisa, hi.
Here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Jamie?
Jamie Millard, District Business Manager and Acting District Forester for North Cascade.
Thanks. Eric?
Good morning, Eric Moberly, Aquatic and Riparian Specialist for State Forest.
Vanessa?
Morning, all. Vanessa Petro, lead wildlife biologist for State Forest.
All right, Lisa Phipps?
Lisa Phipps, Department of Land Conservation and Development in the Oregon Coastal Management Program, representing conservation.
All right, thank you. Dan?
Good morning, everybody. Dan Stark, Oregon State Forestry Natural Resources Extension Agent for the Central and North Coast. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Susan?
Good morning, Susan Knutson Obermeyer. I'm unaffiliated. I'm up in Oak Ridge, and I would have been at Salem until I looked at it last night. So I decided to Zoom because it was a little farther.
Yeah. Thanks, Susan. Nick? And Emily?
Good morning, everybody. Emily Shook, Office Specialist for the State Forest Division in Salem.
All right, anybody that we may have missed?
Good morning, Mike Wilson, State Forest Division Chief.
Yeah, I think we lost Forest Grove.
Yeah, we lost the Zoomers are lost y'all. If you can hear us, sorry, Microsoft Teams
Teamers,
lost you.
Teamers.
Teamers. Which virtual world am I in?
Yeah, Susan, I got an email from you with the Teams link that said it started at 7 this morning. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to be there at 7 this morning. But yeah, then I got another one that said it started at 8. And yeah, what a technology.
Well,
Yeah,
I didn't even see it until last night. I never looked at where it was. I just looked at what time and everything. And then last night it was like Forest Grove. And I have been in meetings for 5 solid days. And I thought I could make it to Salem, but I don't think I can make it to Forest Grove because it's almost 3 hours.
Ooh.
So I decided I could Zoom.
Yep.
Yeah, I got that.
Lisa, if it makes you feel any better, I did the same thing. I assumed it was in Salem for whatever reason. And here I am in my office realizing, oh, it's actually in Forest Grove.
I came across Greg trying to get into the building this morning. I'm like, oh, buddy. And then Colleen. And then a couple other random people that were here not for SVAC, but other things. So actually, I'm the official Salem docent today. I will show you around and I will tell you about things. So.
You can tell us where the meeting isn't.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I got that email yesterday that said it was at 7, and I don't know if it's something about Oregon State. We've had some spam on some things. I don't know if it's all across, but there's been some interesting kind of things that have happened that haven't happened before. So I wasn't sure if that's what it was. So I just deleted it. I was like, I'm not going to be there at 7 anyway.
I think it was spam because I didn't send any messages yesterday.
Oh, you didn't?
No,
Yeah.
until I sent one last night to Emily just to let her know that I wasn't going to be there in person.
Oh, that's fascinating because it's from your email that I linked onto this meeting.
Yeah,
What?
that wasn't me.
Yeah.
In fact, at
Oh.
7, I had actually slept in because I'd been in night meetings. So, I wasn't even up at 7.
Wow. It was a polite spam then because it gave me the correct information and how to get into the meeting. Just told me to be there 2 hours early.
Well, I'm glad you didn't listen. No, in fact, I don't think I'd even been on my email just because I've been so busy.
Interesting. Well, I thought it was so weird why you were sending the link, but then I thought, well, who knows? Who knows what's going on? But oh well, that's funny.
Well, I'm on the board for the local co-op, electric co-op, and we're in the middle of selecting a new general manager. So
Ooh.
we have had long meetings.
Yeah.
I wonder if we're
while
going to
we
have
wait
to.
patiently.
I was wondering if we had to maybe log back in again.
Well, we shouldn't unless they've sent us a different. Let me see. Unless they
I was
sent us
just getting ready to
something
say,
different.
I think that room typically in Forest Grove has issues with internet connectivity. So I feel like this unfortunately might be the state of affairs for us in participation throughout the day.
Oh.
Yeah, it's been a little choppy, and Derek Bangs wrote that they lost the line. So yeah, I don't know if it's choppy on your end, but my end it's kind of gargled.
Oh.
Is it like college? If in 3 more minutes the meeting doesn't start, we can just leave?
Yeah. The professor didn't show up. Yay.
That's right. And just so everyone here knows, Teams tends to be a little more problematic than Zoom for these things because it's a little bit of a data hog, I think, and makes things worse. But as part of agency cost-cutting measures, we've gotten rid of a lot of the workplace, Zoom workplace licenses. So if we do a Zoom meeting, most of it's limited to 40 minutes. So we've across the board gone to Teams.
Dang.
Because we already pay for Teams anyway as part of our overall Microsoft agreement.
That's the way it was in the Forest Service too.
Yeah. And whenever you get invites from ODF, always check the agenda because we'll have the invite sent out and it will look like it starts earlier, like at 8, because we're basically making sure our staff are all in place, unless they come to Salem and are in the wrong place. But
they're trying a phone connection. Oh, that'll be terrible.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
boy.
thanks for that, Lisa. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. So we're joining by phone. Apologies for the IT challenges here in Forest Grove. I will connect with our IT department, see if we can get them to work on that. In the interim, I'm probably just going to put the phone in front of our speakers here. So with that, I'm going to give the phone back to Denise, and maybe if she would recap just a little bit of your intro, that'd be appreciated. Yep.
Yep. All right. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there with us. This is going to be interesting. So my understanding is that everyone online missed the entire piece after all of the introductions. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks. All right. So on the housekeeping side of things, I was just saying that I was able to meet with Colleen and Dawn and we were able to put together an agenda of meetings going throughout 2025 and 2026 that's very much connected to the planning that the department is doing over the next couple of years. And so we did this so that SVAC input will be timely in terms of points in time when it can be helpful for the department as they're making decisions. And so we have that pretty well lined out. 2025 is well lined out, and 2026 is in like a draft phase. And so I think that's pretty exciting because it just kind of talking it through with Dawn and Colleen, it just for SVAC members to just kind of help you think about the fact that the more that we can really engage with the department and engage in really good conversation with them around the issues and the topics that they're bringing to us, the more helpful we'll be and the more useful we'll be. And you know, what I hear from staff all the time is that, and over the years that I've been here, is that because we bring some really diverse perspectives and because we're able to engage in conversation around implementation on the ground, it's really helpful for the department. And so I just encourage everyone on the committee to continue to be engaged. These next couple of years are really important, and it's a really good time for us to bring our perspectives forward. So I just wanted to say that. I also wanted to clarify, I know we've talked about updating the SVAC charter, and we are going to hold off on that. We'll probably won't have our initial discussion about that until one of the meetings in 2026, because we need to get, the department needs to be a little further along on both the FMP and HCP, the two plans, and then there'll be some clarity around the geographic region and the scope for SVAC. And so the timing, as we talked about updating it, we got some clarity around the timing on it. And then we also had talked about holding the March meetings in Forest Grove, and the October meetings will be in Salem, and then the May, and so those will be in different places around the state. And then someone just jokingly said to me, maybe we need to do our March meetings somewhere else, but we will figure this out. And so I think, Dawn, that was everything I had for housekeeping. Is there anything you want to add? And so you guys, we are literally going to be passing a phone around as people speak. So please bear with us. So Dawn, anything?
I think that sounds good. Thank you. Go to Nick, and then I'll follow up on you.
Public comment or nay?
Over here. All right. So because, just to keep with the schedule and in case there are members of the public here who are interested in speaking, this is an open and public meeting and public comment is allowed. And so is there anybody who is attending the meeting because they wish to make public comment? All right. Now I will pass the phone over to Nick.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So I'm just going to provide a few agency updates. We've had a lot of turnover lately. Going to start at the top. So on the board, just this past week, we had 2 appointments renewed, Ben Doimling and Heath Curtis. Heath was filling out the last part of Carla Chambers' term, but so he re-upped as well. And then we have a new board member, Alexi Lavecchio, who is with EcoTrust and based out of Ashland. She brings a lot of experience working like across land landowners, tribal, federal, et cetera, on forestry issues down there, and fire issues as well, and a lot of great experience. So we're excited to have her on board. So that's the board. And then I think, as everybody's aware, Cal resigned at the end of last year, and Kate Skinner was appointed interim state forester. So Kate is now acting as state forester. She was serving as the interim deputy state forester. So when she moved up, she appointed Tim Holzbach as the deputy state forester. So Tim is now serving as interim deputy state forester. Tim brings a lot of great sort of admin experience that she wanted somebody who could kind of bring some admin skills to the position to kind of free her up to do some other things, and Tim brings that. I think that's it up top. And then State Forest, Salem, Mike Wilson's back from leave. Welcome back, Mike. I have interviews set up next week for the biological support unit manager, which is the position that I was in before I promoted into this one. Pauline just recently filled the state forest engineer position, and so Morgan Kawakama is accepted the role. She'd been working for us underneath the state forest engineer and got certified, and so she's officially our new state forest engineer, which we're really excited about. I think that's it on state forests, and then I'm going to pass it to Don, who has a bunch of updates around district forester positions.
We got to get Joe. Joe is our AI program manager.
Yep, absolutely. And maybe we'll start there. Yeah. No, so thank you again. Apologies for the technology. We'll work to get that fixed. Ultimately, a lot of changes, a lot of adapting to change within this organization. And a way we do that is through interims and developmentals, and essentially have needed to do that for quite a while now. So starting with what I call, at least my Northwest leadership team, we've got 5 district foresters, the South Fork camp manager, the REI program manager, my exec support, and my assistant. So ultimately, with Laura Fredrickson going to DEQ, she did that last summer. Joe filled in as a developmental and the REI program manager, and has been doing that for the last 7 months in a developmental. Recently went through a permanent recruitment process and was able to announce on Wednesday that Joe was the selected candidate for that position. So congratulations, and thank you for covering in that interim role, as well as looking forward to the good work we're going to do in the new role. And you'll hear from Joe here later on the agenda this afternoon. So when we think of those 5 district foresters, ultimately, currently, Dan Goody is the only one of the 5 that is performing in his role. So we need his nearly 40 years of experience. I think he said this summer will be his 40th fire season. So given Kate's acting there as the state forester, we've got Eddie Walmark covering the Tillamook district. In Forest Grove, Mike Caffaretta is doing a job rotation with OPRD, with Parks, focused on the Salmonberry Trail and what the governance looks like as the DIA 10-year agreement comes to a close, and that group is looking to figure out what the model of governance looks like moving forward. So he's on a 6-month rotation with Parks. So currently, Steph Beal is acting Forest Grove District Forester. She's doing that for about 3 months. And then Eric Perkins will rotate in to give some opportunity for Forest Grove staff to backfill there. Matt Thomas filling in as the West Oregon District Forester as Michael Curran promoted to the Protection Division Chief. So with that, Michael went into Salem. Matt is the Toledo Unit Forester, is covering that in the interim. And that job announcement is out and has closed. So working to begin interviews for that position as well. And then in North Cascade, Steve Wilson is prepping for retirement. He also hits his 40 years here in a couple months. While he is out doing that, Jamie Millard is covering as the North Cascade District Forester and looking to potentially have a recruitment there prior to fire season as well for North Cascade. So with that, in addition, Robbie LaFave is my assistant, no change there. Aaron Abel, South Fork Camp Manager, and April Sonnenberg is my assistant there too. So a lot of opportunity for different folks to step into different positions. And so with that, new experiences, right? Denise covered kind of some real intentional work we've done around the SVAC committee as we ended this last year, and appreciate that work, and ultimately wanting to make sure as an agency we're utilizing this committee kind of the highest and best use. You all, as you dedicate time to it, right, we're making sure that that input is coming into the agency at the right levels, and we're able to incorporate that stuff. So as Denise said, we actually met a couple times here after our October meeting, thought we had a really good October meeting and wanted to kind of capitalize on that momentum, as well as kind of chart what the next year or two look like to ensure we have alignment there. With that, we also worked through our membership and term expirations, et cetera. So at the end of the last calendar year, we had Mike Tody's term was up, and he graciously agreed to serve another. So Mike has agreed to serve another 3-year term. Lisa High as well. So we've updated her there. Mike McKibben was needing to step away from the committee, and so Ty is joining us officially as the timber representative on the committee for his first official meeting. Thank you for that and your willingness to put in an application and join the committee. Ty joined us last May, I think, in Forest Grove when we went on the tour, kind of an opportunity for him to initially interact with the committee, and then most recently submitted his application. So Ty is starting his 3-year term on the committee, and then Amanda as well re-upped. So with that, our current only vacancy that we have is our tribal position. And with that, we've want to kind of analyze whether what best practices should we use on this landscape to be connected with the tribes related to this committee. So I followed up with Cindy Kolomaychuk, kind of our interim tribal liaison position, but a division, State Forest Division position. And we'll begin some reach out there with tribes to figure out how that may look a little different moving forward. And then with that, as I look at this upcoming year, so 2025, it looks like at the end of this year, Barrett's term will be up, Denise, and those are the two. So we've also done some work to ensure that we've staggered the membership, and so feel good about the committee makeup, the membership. Thank you for the commitment. And with that, welcome, Greg. Greg is joining us. Greg Jacob here in Forest Grove. Once again, apologies. You were not the only one confused this morning. There were no. Mike just drives a little faster than you do, and I think Colleen as well. So apologies for that. Thanks for joining us this morning, Greg. So with that, I think that concludes the agency update piece. I think Denise, unless there's any questions, I'll turn it back to you.
The tribal representative that I'm assuming we're talking where Mike Kennedy had kind of filled that role before there, were we looking to go a different direction? Or are you looking for potential names of folks to fill that role, or what's the thought there?
Yeah, I think some of the questions I think we have is, is a tribal, is one enough, right? As we understand that, tribes don't necessarily speak for each other. And so maybe needing to maybe step back. We've had, Mike Kennedy, we've had a rep from the Grand Ronde at times, but kind of looking at the different tribes, and I'm blanking on the right term, right? But their interest into those landscapes, how many tribes, and what would that look like if we tried to open and extend to each of them, et cetera. As an agency, we've been trying to do some more work around there. It's complicated. It takes time, investment, capacity to ensure that we're reaching out. Actually, as an agency, we've met with the Warm Springs most recently with some frustrations they had around the rollout of the fire map and our ability to communicate with them during that process. So I think as an agency, we're analyzing how we improve our communications with tribes, and it just makes sense to think about that at the SBAC level.
Yeah, I'll just add, and so Cindy's working with the governor's natural resource cluster, and we're sort of taking that, using that as the vehicle for these conversations. So it just moves a little bit slowly because we're kind of at the mercy of that group. But she's engaged in that. She's engaged in the group and talking to them there about, opportunities to participate in SFAC.
Great. Okay. Well, I think, yes.
Yeah, really quick.
You got to sense that.
Cindy. Amanda Sullivan Astor for the record. Yeah, just one other thing that we could think about, a lot of other groups utilize LCIS as the hub, and so having a representative of LCIS where the tribes actually determine collectively who their representative is, could be another alternative rather than trying to get somebody from every single tribe. So something like that could work well.
Thanks.
All right. Sorry, guys, there's a little bit of a lull while we're passing the phone back and forth, like literally. All right. So I'm going to turn this over to Derek. Although I'm a little concerned if you have a presentation, how we're going to share that.
Great question.
Song and dance.
Can you run a show on your?
Derek can do imagery.
Yeah. Interpretive dance. Oh, wouldn't dig it. So I do have a message for sharing with the group online. Emily Shook was kind enough to be able to share her screen as we go through. And then now it's just making sure we can share it in the room for everyone else. And so as folks get logged in here to the computer that's up there, there is a few comments before I get to the part where I am sharing something on the screen. So good morning, folks. Derek Bangs, for the record, Operations Specialist. The last SVAC meeting, I reported out that in my opinion, we were sitting at about a quarter behind due to fire season. Upon reflection, I realized that I should provide some background to help explain quarters, and then I'll walk through where we're at for the fiscal year 25 timber sales. In order to do this, I'll begin with the annual operations plan itself. Emily, could you go ahead and share the that screen with everybody online?
Yeah, let me know if you guys can see it.
Yep, we've got it, Emily.
Perfect.
Okay. The annual operations plans are not just a tool for informing the public of what the planned activities are for the coming year, but they're also a tool for our field districts to help ensure that our sales are following all of our policies and procedures. One of the items listed in both the sale reports as well as the summary documents are sale quarters. Those quarters are listed as 1 through 4 on both locations. The quarters themselves start in ODF's fiscal year of July of each year. So the first quarter would be July through September, followed by October through December for the second quarter, etc. This quarter is when the sale is intended to be completed by the districts and sent to Salem for processing. Once the sales are sent to Salem, it is generally 2 to 3 months before the sale is sold. This allows for our specialists to do a quick review to ensure that the submitted sales are not missing any key instructions, as well as giving at least 6 weeks for at least part of the sale to be reviewed by prospective purchasers and operators. This 6 weeks period is usually cruise reports, which detail the types of timber planned to be removed, as well as the Exhibit A maps that show where the operation is planned to occur. Embedded within that 6 weeks is at least 1 full month for the entire sale to be reviewed. This allows purchasers and operators time to develop their own cost estimates prior to submitting a bid. Now, the annual operations plans go through a public comment period, usually in the March through May timeframe, and are often approved in that June to July period. While it is possible for some work to be completed on sales as they are going through the public comment period, this is usually very minimal, as we want to wait until we've had a chance to process all of the potential public comments and make any changes to the proposed plan prior to performing a large amount of field work on sales that could potentially be shifted during the late stages of the planning process. This delay in beginning to work on sales, as well as the lag time from districts completing field work on a sale and then when it is sold, often leads to sales that were submitted in the first quarter not selling until the second quarter. This does not necessarily mean that no sales are sold during this period of time, as the same timeline occurs on the back end of the fiscal year, where sales were laid out and processed from the first quarter of the previous fiscal year. This isn't a new process. It's one that's been occurring for some time, and it's just kind of churning away in the background. Okay, with that background in place, I'm going to start going into this chart here. So a quick explanation of what everyone is seeing. What we have here is all of the sales that were originally planned to be completed in the first quarter, or that July through September timeframe. Everything in orange are sales that were pushed from the first quarter to the second quarter. This was due almost entirely due to sending staff on fires over an incredibly busy summer. One item to note here is that one sale in North Cascade was actually completely dropped from the plan at this stage. It was a first entry thinning unit, and upon cruising, the stand was determined to not be ready for harvest. Despite the sale being dropped, the volume that was originally associated with the sale is still something we're tracking. And as the fiscal year goes by, either other sales pick up this volume by coming in over initial estimates, or we will look at pulling up an alternate sale or adjusting during the next fiscal year to account for this volume. As you can see, there are a number of sales that were pushed to the second quarter. At the last SVAC meeting, we were just ending the first quarter. And this is where I said, in my opinion, we were a full quarter behind. Emily, go ahead and shift to the next tab, please. All right. Moving to the second quarter, which is that October through December timeframe, you can see here that the number of sales is starting to pick up. Many of the districts were starting to get through their backlog. However, there's still a number of sales that were pushed off to subsequent quarters. At this stage, my estimate was that we were about 1.5 to 2 months that we had made up of the ground that we had lost during the first quarter. Of note here is that the Tillamook Tillamook District had a sale, Coast Range South, that was dropped due to low volumes post-cruise. This was a thinning sale as well. After they were looking at it, the cruise came up very close to the prescription that they had planned for the sale. The district is still looking at this particular sale in more detail to see if they can still pursue a subset of the acres or if existing sales will pick up the volume. Again, as explained in the previous slide, if the sale is dropped completely, the volume associated with it will still need to be made up in some fashion. Moving to the third quarter. All right. This is where we're at right now. So this is actually the last month of the third quarter. Almost all the districts have caught up by this stage. Forest Grove and Tillamook are bumping one sale to the fourth quarter, But other than that, everybody has caught up with the workload that they were looking at. Note that there are still several sales on this list that show a partial completion. That is that fourth column, the percent complete. I meet with the operations coordinators twice a month to work through these plans and discuss how everyone's doing on accomplishing their fiscal goals, as well as coordinating help across the districts to ensure that we complete the plan. It is possible that a few of those sales with partial completions do not get their sales done by the end of the month. If that's the case, then they'll probably be rolling 1 to 2 weeks into the next month, but it'll be pretty soon. And then go ahead and bump to the fourth quarter. And then here you can see the fourth quarter, which starts next month. Districts are already working on some of these. Some of them are pretty far along. Some of them aren't out yet. I've put in all of these as we've been ticking through the anticipated bid dates, off to the side, as well as when the sales are expected to go to Salem. So I want to pause for a bit and just kind of talk about where we're at. Coming into July of this fiscal year, the state was on fire. State forest staff responded to the fire bell and spent the next 3 months on fires spread across the state. For those staff who stayed home, they were chasing a staggering administration workload as roads were being built and logging continued. Very little layout was performed during this time. Staff that were on fires or at home were both on emergency status as the candle was burned at both ends to hold things together. When the rains came and vast swaths of the state took a deep breath and relaxed, the state forest staff shifted gears into a different emergency. The workload that had built up during the firefighting efforts or working hand in hand with operators on existing sales hadn't gone away. Staff is intimately aware of how critical these sales are to our local communities, and the focus on getting caught back up was impressive. I'm incredibly proud to be in front of the group today and tell you that we've been able to claw our way back from this backlog. I'll also say it with a bit of trepidation. Next week is the Department of Forestry's incident management team training. Spring is upon us, with summer following closely behind. You can only spend so long with the foot on the gas before things start to burn out. The good news here is that as we've been going through this process, we've been looking at ways to increase efficiency across all the districts. But with that, I'll go ahead and pause here and see if there's any questions I can answer from the group. And thank you, Emily. You can go ahead and close the sharing.
Nobody from EOA here. And compliment them on get to the chop up.
Thanks, Vanna. Mike Tody, Oregon Hunters here. Just first off, just a compliment to amazing feat there to get caught up. That's not an easy thing to do. I don't know that that's a real sustainable model to use. And I think the agency has talked about that concern. I'm going to say for a decade, might be dipping back into some memories of mine and some of those conversations there too. But wondering what the conversations are like, as you watch the report out from agency leadership down at the legislators right now and talking about fire seasons and the new normal and what to expect. We can all pray for rain all summer, but that doesn't seem very realistic. So what is the conversation? How are you going to address this moving forward into the future? You just going to run people until they all tip over, or is there a plan to do something different? Maybe that's a question for like Dawn more than you, Derek. So, since I have his phone, I guess. So. Yeah, thanks, Mike. And, what a challenge. And as you state that, are we going to run people till we tip over? I think we are. And we have, right, nearly over the last decade. We're still focused as an agency trying to get some large fire funding fix or some fire funding fix. And we've spent nearly a decade on that issue. And And as most recently as yesterday, staff was down there putting forth the recommendation of that fire funding, the Fire 35, as they call it, that large fire funding group. So a focus there around the costs, et cetera. I haven't seen much interest in any additional dollars for capacity or future investments currently in this agency. More around how do we fund, the model around funding. I think it's been challenging here with a lot of the recent media, et cetera, that we've seen as an agency level. I think the uncertainty there as folks are filling at the leadership level. I don't see an interest in investment other than how does the state pay for the costs of fire season. In addition, that's a challenge because, right, the State Forest Division staff does participate significantly, and in addition, have our own financial realities currently. And so while we may say, currently holding some positions vacant, that only kind of further exacerbates that issue of the bodies aren't there. And maybe how we can participate is different given not having a fully staffed division as well. So a really long-winded way of saying, I think we're still looking to see, we don't have a different model. And I do think with the current conditions and the fire seasons, we are running our people into the ground. I think this last year we hit and it was around our last SVAC meeting, but as an agency, we hit the 1 million hours worked as a staff. We were at 700,000 hours the year before. And so I've heard it characterized at BT that essentially we're asking people to work a 15-month year, not a 12-month year. Ultimately, because of fire season, we've seen what that has done to maybe our regular flow of our timber sale auctions throughout a year. Uncertain of what that cost was in bid prices. But also what it did mean is then State Forest put quite a few folks on overtime to get caught back up. So there's definitely costs across the division given these types of fire seasons. Not a great place to be.
Well, Don, I hate to ask this at a public briefing. We've had.
Yeah, sorry.
For folks online, Dan Goody, DF Astoria. We've had some discussions and done some preliminary work on what costs are even within the agency. The State Forest Division is doing roughly $100 million or $1 million worth of protection work within the current job, not counting fire deployments. Fire inspections, pre-season fire prep, training, all of that work. South Fork, the inmate crew coordinators, the South Fork camp director, so those had fire funding in their positions. That tallies up to roughly 18 to 20 FTE of personnel annually. If we get to place within the agency, you think about it holistically on how the work's being developed and fund them by where the work is doing, that would either, if you wanted to address this capacity issue, that's 18 to 20 more FTE the State Forest Division could have for the work that's currently being done and make up for some of this loss of production during fire season. Or you could take it as a cost savings. But that's an agency thing that flows to the legislature to get that funding and authorization. But that's the piece that the agency is going to have to build out and show the need to do that. in my perspective, that's the view we've got to take at the agency level and get out of the state forest bucket, the private forest bucket, and the protection bucket. But that's a bigger conversation at the executive team level and then following up through some LCs that we should be ginning up in July for the October due date for legislative concepts for the next biennial budget period. I'm not sure with the transition with a new state forester and all that we're going to have the wherewithal to get that together. But that's a pathway I see to answer this burnout model that we've got right now.
If we're talking LCs for the next full session,
Oh yeah,
you just need to survive for 3 more years.
yeah, we're in survival mode.
Derek Bangs, operational specialist. So just to follow up on Dan's comment, so wow, I'm hearing myself echoed. That's awesome.
Can you turn that on?
All right, can everybody hear me now? Get a thumbs up from folks. Mike, since you're the only person on camera.
Thumbs up.
All right. So just to follow up on Dan's comment, you know, the legislative fixes, the long-term items, that's something that's more in the future. And so what I have to look at is what we can do today. And so what we've done is really streamline how we're sharing staff across the districts. And so as one district gets their items accomplished, we're looking at what we can do to have folks flow between the different offices a lot more than what we've done historically. You know, that has its own challenges around needing to move staff around temporarily, putting people up in hotels to get work done. But the focus is on getting the work done. Just as much as we need the revenue coming in for our own workflows, the operators need it for their work, the mills need it for the lumber. And so we're well aware of that. And that's really what my focus has been is, well, Don and Mike and company are working on the long-term plan, on the short-term plan. You know, I'm trying to squeeze what we can out of this orange. Mike, do you have a comment?
Yeah, that's all good stuff. That's all true. And so even if we are to come up with some solutions there, you know, it is, there's a time lag between when we can come up with them and when we can implement them. I would say, you know, this is a time where it's really great having Kate as our state forester. She understands these issues very well, obviously, and has, you know, is dedicating the time to some strategic thinking at ET to really try and solve some of these things. Some of the conversations that we're having span, you know, do span our divisions. There's even something we don't talk a lot about here, but G&A, Good Neighbor Authority, and work where we do timber sales on federal lands is right now a little bit siloed. State Forest does participate in that, and that's great. But as we bring on positions there, what kind of flex do we have in capacity to bring on more capacity to handle not only G&A work, but also State Forest work? So there's a lot of different avenues in play right now, and but like Dan says, you know, we need to kind of get that together, and if there are legislative concepts associated with that, we need to get them ready to go for next session. But thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
You're for the record, Barrett Brown, Recreation. You were talking in kind of a really temporal local scale, and they're talking about the LCs, which have a different time scale. We only meet 3 times a year. And so for our input on this kind of, frankly, it's a communication challenge. We probably have to think in terms of how our input can matter on this longer scale. And legislators have to have a reason to act. They can listen to the technical presentation about these FTE and the dollars and cents, but somehow I'm happy to see the board actually talking more about defending the agency and in the public political sphere. This is a public input moment, and I just want to try and encourage the exploration of just additional ways to communicate with the public about what's going on here, and not let these conversations just continue to happen to the department behind the firewalls. You're required to stay behind the wall and communicating. Well, there have to be additional public champions for the department. The next state forester has to be principally charged with standing up the reputation and the pride in the culture, being willing to stick that person's neck out. And then that hopefully redounds to the governor doing the same thing in public. It's just very frustrating as somebody who tries to work from the public side on agency issues to feel like the agency doesn't have the public champions that they deserve. And it's just impossible to advocate for money. If the legislature, if I talk to a legislator, they're basically sitting there, well, make me, give me a reason to say yes, because I don't have any reasons right now. All the reasons are, in my district and the media, all the reasons I get are the reasons to say no to you, to the department. So sorry if there's no real handles for you all to grab there in that comment, but we only meet 3 times a year. And I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Barrett. And I think I am constantly, that realization of how early this work needs to get done to align with that timeline. I think what I believe, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, for those legislative concepts, I think there's been a request that those for that next session would be to the governor in October. And I think what that means for us would be to the Board of Forestry in September. And so ultimately work to do in the next, 3 to 5 months around that topic. And to align that with an SVAC meeting, right? We only have one additional meeting prior to those timelines.
It occurred to me, I think I left it one key thing I wanted to get across is it's probably obvious to everybody in the room, especially SVAC members, everybody who actually works on these problems know they're difficult. It's easy if you're not actually trying to do the work. But this is independent of how happy you are with various pieces that the agency is, where they're performing and what direction they're going. Even if you hate some of the policy positions, nobody benefits from an agency that is hamstrung by this kind of damage. So it's no matter where you're at on policy, you want a culture that performs and that's workforce that is proud of where they're at. So that's one of that. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'll just make two quick comments, just, mostly for the edification of the committee here, but kind of to that end, Barrett, it will be exceedingly more difficult to have that champion at the top if the governor's Senate Bill 1051 gets passed and the state forester no longer has to be a forester. So that becomes exceedingly more challenging, I think, from a public kind of advocacy for the profession of forestry, right? Just want to put that on the record. You probably guess where AOL is at on that specific concept. So there's kind of that piece, and I think it's definitely a challenging place to be. And then on the timeline and kind of the new process that the governor has for LCs and budgets, in the past, there'd be the governor's recommended budget, but the legislature would look at kind of the agency's recommended budget. And if there was things that didn't make it into the GRB, then they could pull from those other, policy option packages or LCs and different things that the agency really needs. That process has really been turned on its head, and that the new process of having to do all this stuff up front and then having to get that stamp of approval by the governor, now the legislature doesn't have as many options of what the agency actually needs to be able to pull into that budget. And it makes it that much more important for the folks around this table that are on the committee and that do engage in the kind of political process to be able to advocate on behalf of the agency for those things that really are needed to move through, that the agency can't advocate for themselves because they are not in the governor's recommended budget. So just to kind of put a marker down for everybody here that cares about state forest issues and that really wants to see positive change and to kind of bring that these needs forward. A lot of it really is on us now with kind of some of the new processes that are in place. So just want to kind of put that down for folks that don't necessarily follow the process or as are engaged in the process, because I think everything that you said, Barrett, is true. And I think a lot of us here really agree with the sentiments that were put down. And we're in a really challenging time, whether it's because of fire season, because of budgets, because of all these different things that we're kind of dealing with on the state forest side. And the reality that, the funding mechanism is through the timber sales. And if people are gone for a quarter of the year, not doing those things that actually bring in the funding, then you're in a really challenging spot, but you're also trying to serve the public too, right? So it's definitely difficult. So just kind of want to put those markers down for everybody to be thinking about, how we as a body can act and have opinions, but also as individuals that are engaged in this work. So thanks, Denise.
This is Nick, for the record. I'll just say, and Barrett, I really appreciate those comments. We do have tremendous pride, though, still, to be clear. I mean, each of us individually, I would say, and collectively, tremendous pride in what we do. To your point, we don't feel particularly supported in the public sphere or the political sphere or the legislative sphere. But every one of us gets up every day proud of what we do and happy to do it. It's a shame, really. That's all.
Anybody on, go ahead.
I think there was a comment online,
Okay, was there a comment online?
but if you go to the chat.
Oh, in the chat. Okay, let's see. Let's see.
This is Dan Stark, and I just wanted to throw out there, think about Oregon State Forestry and Natural Resource Extension, our whole program, and ways that we might be able to partner. I listed, ways that we could participate in public education to really on our state forests. So this could be an ongoing conversation. Maybe there's some tours, more K through 12 events. So just consider FNR Extension and your partners and helping get the great word out on all the good work that y'all do.
Thanks, Dan. Right, anyone else? Derek,
That was it. That was it, unless there was any other questions as far as where we're at for the fiscal 25, but it's pretty much every sale.
All right, excellent work. And I will just say to Nick, the pride that the staff takes in the work that we do is very apparent. And it came very clearly through in your presentation as well, Derek. And so I think I can speak for everyone in the group when I just say thank you for, working 15 instead of 12 months out of the year. I think as a group, we can recognize that and say, at least from our perspective, I'll just speak personally, super supportive of the work that you guys are doing. And I know that it's not easy right now. Lisa.
Yes, thank you. Yes, in today's world where government work greatly appreciated, I get it. I did as a personal input, just I put in my opinion on funding. I think, I mean, I know it's controversial. I think that, and we're not here to talk about that, but I think the kicker, using the kicker and interest funds, I'm not an economist, so I don't know how real that would be, but I did write to my, I wrote to both my legislative folks, Weber and the other guy, I'm sorry, I can't think because I'm nervous talking, that I thought that the kicker and using the interest rates on that to pay for wildfire was important because I felt that the state forestry, the group I'm sitting on, it was overwhelming and that we needed more funding. So as an individual, that's what I did this week. I didn't do it as a group thing. I don't know how people feel about that option, but I think it's the best option that anyone's come up with yet.
Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate that opinion. We work really hard not to lean into the policy side of things, but I think individuals writing to their legislators is, in whatever your opinion, is being engaged in that process. Yeah. Great. Well, we're a little bit early for a break, but I don't want, so I'm wondering, Colleen, if it makes sense to maybe take we could take like 10 minutes and come back at 10:20 and get started. Does that work? That's for me. All right. Okay. That's ready. Yeah, no. Just plow right through, but let's just take 10 minutes and then we'll come back and get started.
See, in the old days, Andy White would have made us sit here without getting up till 4 o'clock.
Yeah, well, I won't do that.
I was promised a coffee, so I gotta go get one.
You're promised.
was I did go to Salem. I just have to admit, that was the first time I've done that in 27 years. Tons of near misses of going to the wrong place. So definitely on my A game today. I think I made 3 wrong turns trying to navigate here. So a little flustered, but we're going to pull it together. Quite interesting morning. Today I'm going to actually talk about a couple of topics. A few that are informational, and then some that or at least one that we've pretty robust feedback on. I'll be starting with the current status of our implementation plan revisions. We talked about those in depth in the October meeting, and I just want to give you an overview of what they are. And then I want to give an overview of the FY26 operations plan, talk through kind of what the numbers are looking like, and what some of the resource considerations that have been big topics of our public comment have been in the past. So we'll kind of identify the sales and where those are on the districts. And then I think I'm going to close with, we're going to talk about recreation a little bit, kind of the plans for the FY26, and then I'm going to close with public engagement. We're going to kind of talk through what we do, some of the plans that we have for improvements and new things that we're going to implement this year. We're going to talk about adjacent landowners and really kind of dig in on the outreach that we're considering, or the different types of outreach we're considering. So we'll have a good conversation about that kind of towards the end. But first, I'm going to start with the IPs. I thought this was going to be a little longer, but because of some of the timing issues that Derek talked about earlier, we're a little bit behind in our planning process. We're about 2 weeks behind. So we did start our public comment later than I had talked about when I was here in October. So we've been out for public comment for about 2 weeks. We started on February 20th, and it'll be closing on March 21st. So before I really dig into that, let's see. Let me look at my notes really quick. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's being updated in the plan. I know we've got some new people, and I just wanted to kind of remind folks, because we are still in public comments. So if you want to add to that, that would be great. Or if the people you represent want to get the word on too, that would be great. So we talked a lot about our last meeting about the issues that we're having with implementation and meeting kind of the multitude of objectives that we have due to those overlapping constraints of the different plans we're working under. And so really what we wanted to do was try to align some of our policies that were associated with our forest management plan, specifically our species of concern policy, and align that with our habitat conservation plan strategies. So really, let's see. So we really focus on aligning the terrestrial anchor sites that we have on the landscape and our desired future condition, and really aligning those with the habitat conservation areas. And then also our aquatic anchor buffers and aligning those with our riparian conservation areas, or our riparian buffers that are within the draft HCP. Our biologists worked with our district staff and also the FNW to work through kind of the final pieces of that. And those changes are reflected in the implementation plan revisions. In addition to that, we have had a lot of comments about climate change and carbon plan, and then providing better linkages in our current documents to those to really highlight what we are doing. Because we do a lot of the things that are in there, it's just really hard for some folks to really pick those out when we're not using the same words or verbiages that are in that climate change and carbon plan. So we did add a section to that implementation plan revision to just kind of reflect what it is about our current forest management plan and this implementation plan in this time period, and how that connects specifically to the climate change and carbon plan. And then one of the other larger things that we did was simplify our annual harvest targets that we have talked about. They were ranges, and now it's just a specific target for all of the districts except for the Southwest unit. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we get closer. Is that mine?
Separate.
Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure that I am not showing up there.
Elaine?
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question. What do you mean by simplifying the volume targets?
Yeah, it's a good, so before we had kind of ranges, there was about a 4 million board foot range, and we'll talk a little bit this in the AOP section, but before, for example, Tillamook was 48 million board feet to 52 million board feet, and the goal was to work within that range. And that range helped, like as we did more work inside of the HCAs, it kind of accounted for that. It kind of accounted for some of the issues that we were seeing in the modeling with the volume. And what that did is it kind of, we were getting a lot of folks' opinions of we should be working at the low end of the range or we should be working at the high end of the range. And for this 2-year period that these IPs, we were directed by the state forester to work at the high end of the range. And so that's what we decided to put into the implementation plan. So we're working at the high end of that range with a target, with one board foot target. And I can show that if you guys want to just really hold on, go into the AOP. So this planned harvest volume used to be a range. And we just essentially took the high end of the range, and that's going to be the target. And our goal is over the 2-year period to balance that target. So we're as close as we can to that. So there may be a little additional volume this year on some districts, and there'll be less on those districts next year. Or there may be a little bit lower with the plan to be a little bit higher next year. Our goal is to get to that target, but it's really difficult with some of these large sales, as you guys know. We may be a little bit higher, a little bit low.
And that's how we had it before. So how our IPs were set for the last decade was this way. And then it was adjusted over time each year, flexed. I think by the end of the 10-year period of the IPs, we were less than 0.1% off these numbers over time, just as we flexed each year. The range was both, we had direction to operate on the high end of it. And so at that point, it was no longer a range. We had already been told what we were supposed to do. And it was also just somewhat confusing on if we were supposed to be, like if we were slightly over it, should we be removing sales or units from, should we be taking off 3 acres to, making poor operational decisions to just land inside of it. And this alleviates that. But it didn't expand from the ranges that we had before. They're the same numbers that we had before, just on the top end.
Can either of you speak to the value of a range as opposed to a hard target? Like, why would we want a range? Why do we have a range?
We thought it would be easier. Like this, it was one of those things we thought it would be more efficient. But because the range was so narrow, it was very difficult to know where we needed to be in that. And go ahead, you can answer that.
Because historically, when we did the modeling all the way back to H&H, we had ranges and alternatives of thinning only to clear cuts only, and they produced highs and lows of expected volumes for an IP period. So we used those as the sideboards of this is the range you can do. That thinking carried over into the new piece, but thinking more of what you're going to do in and outside of HCAs. In the Astoria district, we took the low end as this is what we can produce inside or outside of the HCAs, and anything from that bottom to the top was what we could get inside the HCAs. So it was kind of aligned with how it was modeled. But that really got people complicated, and it was really hard to articulate that detail. We're still trying to kind of follow in that, but I think from a planning perspective, having the high end of the range is a simpler conversation.
Just quickly for Ty's benefit, HCAs are habitat conservation areas under our HCP, so it's a constraint.
So one other, and I know Colleen said she was going to touch on it, but as we talk about it, there's still a range up there for the Southwest District, and I think it helps articulate why sometimes the ranges work and sometimes they don't. For the Southwest District, that is such a low number that it's if we were to take just half of that, it would be very difficult to plan a sale that would be that small, and still kind of pencil out for the move in and then all the operations. where having the 0 to 2.2 range gives us the ability to do, a sale every other year that captures that, and then just have one move in, be more efficient with our work, where it was actually hampering us on the other districts where it was a bigger sale footprint. And so that's why we shifted. To be perfectly honest, the range was sort of my idea and it was a bad one. And so I thought it was going to work really well because I had seen other places where we had the range. And one of the reasons that I was pushing for the range was, like I said, we were 0.1% off after a 10-year period of time from our previous IP, but it took a lot of work every year jockeying things around to try to jostle that one sale that landed just perfect in there. And especially as cruise volumes would come in and shift things around a little bit. However, as much work as that was, it was nowhere near the amount of work of trying to jostle the range after I started using it for a year. And so it's kind of seeing where things worked and then sticking with what works best.
I'm actually really glad we tried it because I think we would have tried to pull that into the new IP. And now we know that that's probably kind of a less efficient way to do things. So as we're looking for these efficiencies, just to free us up with more time, and we don't have to have as many conversations. The target is the target, and we're going to be a little low some years, we're going to be a little high some years, but overall we're going to average out over time.
Denise made a process question. Are we going to kind of discuss our comments or feedback on the IP here, or is the preference that we just send those in through the normal public comment portal, or how do you guys want to do?
It would be great if you did put them into the public comment just so we can track it and we can provide, because other people are interested in that, and the people that you represent are also interested in that. And so when we do it, we consider all the comments, we put a response document together, so it does help us get our story out there. That being said, feedback's great, so.
One more question. Greg Jacob, environmental rep. I did comment on the IPs, but my question is, if you shoot for the high range, does that affect negatively the carbon climate change plan? Or that the CCP?
Theoretically, yeah. I mean, so if you're harvesting more, then you're taking more carbon off the stump, right? We're talking about pretty minuscule.
That's what I was wondering. Is it minuscule or
significant amounts within the range? Yeah, it's not.
Okay.
It's negligible.
And I think that the key is we're still in this transition period of time where we're really just trying to kind of keep core business going until we have kind of our new forest management plan, our new implementation plans, and our new modeling and what our new target levels are. And the great thing about that is we're not this isn't the only time we're gonna set a target, right? A harvest target. This is something that we're going to be doing adaptive management on over time. How are we doing remodeling, readjusting our harvest targets over every IP that we do. And so in doing that, if there are any adjustments or any issues that we're doing where if we're cutting too much or if we're not cutting enough, because we're learning more information along the way, it will adjust over time. So anything that we do that's in addition to, or if it were too much, will be adjusted as we go into the next implementation planning, modeling, which for us will be in the next 2 years.
Also just preference, there's a lot of different ways to measure carbon. And so one of the ways is with boards as they're cut and then stored. I've used it in the past as almost like somebody playing craps where they're putting some of the money back in their pocket and not leaving it all on the table. And so, to say leaving it on the stump is always more effective is not necessarily the most accurate answer. There's a lot of research on it. I think the latest one's from OSU, where they have shown different ways of storing carbon. And so it just depends on how you come up with the number rather than just saying it would affect. And And the reason I didn't jump at an answer there is that's a complicated question that there's probably 13 or 14 different scientific papers I could show you that have completely different answers. And so,
Yeah, I would high level there because there's sequestration of the subsequent stand, there's the carbon in the wood, et cetera. So it's like, that's why I just said negligible.
Mike, I see, you have a comment?
Yeah, specific to the climate change and carbon plan for the agency. One thing to note is that in there for state forests, it does defer to our planning process and our planning hierarchy for achieving any goals. And the metric for that, which doesn't currently exist, will be part of the performance measure discussion that you'll hear later on today. And that's how the board would set a specific expectation, whether it's a threshold or a trend or whatever, however they choose to characterize that. They will set that expectation through the performance measures for the new forest management plan.
Just, we don't want to get into this level of detail now. That's fine. I'm just thinking about this particular IP revision as a transition plan sort of thing. And, looking through the various district IPs there, just trying to figure out this entire crosswalk between structure-based management, the new management plan, anchors to conservation areas. And so some of the methodologies in there, as you reviewed landscape design to move older forest structure layered into HCA, that makes perfect sense to me. As I started looking through a little more details on acres, so if we looked at layered older forest structure and current DFC and HCAs, there's variability in there. There wasn't a straight crosswalk. And so I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around where we're at today. And I had some other thoughts on some of that, but just trying to figure out, if we looked at our desired future condition as you have it proposed in this IP, how close does that overall match up with habitat conservation areas that would be prescribed through the HCP and its subsequent forest management plan? Is it 80% there? Is it 100% there? What's the go?
That's good.
I can speak to that a little bit. So 100% of the habitat of the desired future condition acres are within habitat conservation areas. And so one of the things we did here was we shifted all of it that was inside of those habitat conservation areas. And so there is no desired future condition left outside of the habitat conservation areas, so that those two are in alignment. Having said that, the habitat conservation areas are larger than our desired future condition acreage for each district. How much larger depends on each district's percentage of both what they had planned for a desired future condition, as well as how many acres were set aside as part of the habitat conservation areas. In general, that's if you're using rough averages, all of the districts have at least 30% desired future condition, and somewhere between 43 to 48% in habitat conservation areas. And so that nexus there's somewhere between 12 to 13% to up to approximately 18% that is in the habitat conservation areas that is not covered under the desired future condition, but due to how our implementation plans are currently written would be managed the same.
Can I?
Yep.
So how would that align with terrestrial anchors then?
The terrestrial anchors are all 100% within the habitat conservation areas and the desired future condition. All of the terrestrial acres are within desired future condition complex. And so we layered all of that together. That was one of the major shifts with this plan.
So as we look towards in a few years when you get to do this all over again, You know, from,
You hope.
yeah, so essentially, those portions of, if we're looking at it from a map standpoint, there's not gonna be significant change.
No, in, like, on the pathway that we're at, the habitat conservation areas are the strategy. And basically, we've taken all of our forest management plan constraints or larger constraints, so the DSC and the TAS, and have aligned the two. The habitat conservation areas are larger than the footprint of our DSC and our terrestrial anchors combined, but the habitat conservation areas are still larger than that. And what I have up here, you know, if you're interested in this, as you can go, this is on our webpage in the implementation plan, where you can go to access the documents. There's a web map viewer there, so you can kind of turn those on and off and see the differences, where the desired future condition was in the past and where it is now, where the terrestrial anchors were in the past and where they are now, just so you can kind of see the differences that were in there.
Just a point of clarification for the whole world. I would encourage you to use DFC complex, not just DFC.
Sorry about that.
I know you're trying to compact it. You used complex once. This is great. It's a confusing space for most people.
Very fair. This is why we write our presentations out. So we spell out all of our acronyms. And that's something we did change in both the implementation plans and in the annual operations plan. We've taken all the acronyms out. Makes it a little bit more lengthy, but we were having to do like 3 pages of acronyms to supplement with that. And so part of the accessibility and part of the engagement that we wanted to do is we just totally scrubbed it. So yeah, so both plans this year will be completely free of acronyms.
Very general question, I should know this. After all the comment period comes in, who reads the comments and?
Yeah.
And what decisions are made after all these comments?
Yeah, that's a good, good question. So how that process is, so my staff, I have a team of 5 planners and 2 of us have access to like the state forest comment email that comes in. And so basically what we do is we catalog them. We categorize them. You'll see in kind of the summary response document, the different categories we have. We identify if they're sales specific, what if they're forest management related, if they're roads related, steep slope related, you know, we kind of put those categories in. Also, if there's like specific comments to districts, some comments are out of scope. We're starting to get some wildfire map comments in ours, and we get those over to the right people so that they have access to those. We read every single one of them. We identify any that are recommending action that are within policy. So we have our forest management plan and our habitat conservation plan, and we have for the implementation plan, that's different. But we also have our targets within the implementation plan. And so we kind of filter it through that lens, like, is it within policy or is it out? And then we get that to the appropriate district forester at the AOP level, or division leadership and the state forester for the IP level. We have a lot of meetings to talk about comments and potential changes we want to make, what we can do now, what we might do in the future. And some is just education, because there's just a lot of misinformation out there that we need to resolve. So we do, I think probably every comment is probably touched and read at least 3 times. All of the managers have access to the documents that are sent in, so they can read their specific, anything that's specific to them or that they're interested in. REI reads all of their comments. And then we summarize those in the summary document. And at the end, we identify all of the changes that we've made based on the comments, and those go into the finalized plan. But we also provide the response document that goes into the plan, but we also send that out to every person that's commented, so that there's, so they have kind of what happened based on the comments they have.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I'm gonna start sharing again. It's back. Was. All right. This is gonna take too long. I should know better by now. Presenter view. Sorry, you guys, I shouldn't have switched in between. Okay, so so far we've only received 5 comments, and I know that seems like a few, but honestly, for our public comment periods, we usually don't get very many in the first 2 to 3 weeks. They always come in usually in the last couple of days, so this isn't a surprise. So if you want to help us with our workloads, get your comments in, because that helps us do turnaround really quick. So I know we don't give a lot of time, but that is a plug in there. But the interesting thing is it is a very wide range of perspectives on a couple of topics. We've had concern that we're limiting harvest and forest management. Limiting harvest and forest management would lead to increased wildfires and make those fires more difficult to manage. Others have expressed that the implementation plans need to support the draft habitat conservation plan and place priority on climate-informed forest principles and practices such as longer rotations and passive management. There is a recommendation to implement climate-smart forestry and not harvest older forests, and another to manage declutter and thin forests to reduce wildfire risk. One commenter supported increasing harvests and reducing bureaucracy to support timber jobs and working families, while another recommended using carbon credits for sensitive areas or areas adjacent to private landowners in order to mitigate climate changes and to maintain revenue flow. So we were seeing some comments, like I said, about the wildfire map. I think there was a couple of references to the California wildfires. So it's really on a lot of people's minds. I think that's something that we're going to continue to see into the annual operations plan. But that's what we've received so far.
Are those comments usual suspects?
No, this was a whole new, well, there's one that we know, and then the rest were people that we don't know.
The usual suspects won't have those in.
It's fine. Usually totally fine. I just like giving a hard time. So it kind of, Greg definitely was ahead of the game, but we will be evaluating the comments, kind of identifying the themes, developing the response document, summarizing those changes. And then we'll be meeting with Nick, Mike Wilson, and then also the state forester, Kate Skinner, to talk about the comments, any themes that are there, any concerns that she has, and if there are any adjustments that need to be made. And then she'll be signing the memo to approve those once any adjustments have been made based on the comments that we've received. The critical timing for this, for us, is that those will be signed before we go to public comment on the FY26 annual operations plan. And so it's a pretty tight timeline. So we kind of have a team prepared to go through those comments as quick as can. We will take as long as we need to make sure we're doing our due diligence and giving the right amount of consideration to that. But it is kind of it'll be expedited so we can turn around and get the annual operations plan out. For those of you who were here when we did this in 2023, it's a very similar process that we used then. Okay. Any questions on that? Go ahead, that's fine.
Is this a time to share just general comments?
Yes, I think that's a great
like now. So,
yeah.
Full transparency, I didn't read every single one of the IPs from cover to cover. they're kind of boilerplate-ish sort of thing. So there might be some details there. Just a couple things, just for the sake of the group here, and you're probably already aware of this, but the Oregon Conservation Strategy that is referenced in there is being reviewed as we speak and being changed. It's now the State Wildlife Action Plan, or SWAP. And I don't know that is not supposed to be completed until like October. And so your timing is off by just about that much. So I don't know how to go about referencing that, thinking about that, but that will include updates and changes to the species list, some of which are included in your draft IPs right now. So I'm not sure how to even navigate that, or there might be enough information by the time you get to the end if you want to change the species list or add or subtract or something along those lines there. Denise, do you want me just to rattle through all of mine now, or?
Just keep on going, Mike, and if anybody wants to jump in, just raise a hand.
I would just offer a general comment that, and Amanda, thank you for reminding me that Northwest Forest Land Amendment comments are due on March 21st as well. Thank you for that alignment.
You're welcome. I aimed to please.
From the Oregon Hunters Association perspective, as we continue to review and engage on public land management, I would just make the comment that the observation I have is the term habitat has now become completely synonymous with old growth or old forest structure or old growth characteristics. And I want to encourage at least state forests to remember that there are a tremendous array of indigenous species that are using state forests that don't need or have as a part of their life cycle old growth or older forest structure and that. And somehow I would like to see some, if we gave a tenth as much time to other forms of habitat as we are those older forest structures in our planning processes, I think to me, there's value in that. And just remember that sort of thing. So
yeah, I appreciate that.
In terms of transportation management, I really didn't see any thoughts or processes, and maybe this is more of an AOP thing, but around potential use of seasonal road closures. I know that's happening on some districts already for either for buck and bullock escapement during hunting seasons, or perhaps maybe nesting, calving, fawning season, something like that would encourage folks to maybe just take a look at that, see how that works. I saw a little bit of mention of monitoring and detection efforts around EAB. Emerald ash borer is front and center on everybody's mind on these valley fringe type forests there. So I don't know if that's something that is not specific to an annual year in an AOP. So if we're going to maybe highlight that better, perhaps in this short-term IP duration time, there's an opportunity to do that. And just one on the recreation side of things there, I'll give you some more detailed comments in writing on that, Joe, but just the conversation around e-bike use is running rampant everywhere. And now even OPRD is evaluating that. And I will just let you know from our perspective at OHA, an e-bike is a motorized vehicle and should only be allowed on motorized trails or motorized systems. That's our perspective on that. And if you want the research to support some of that and its effects on habitat and wildlife, I'm happy to share that with folks. And the last one real quick is just a curiosity question. Over time, there's been conversations around IPs, not staying at the district level, but going to a forest level and some of that. And I'm wondering, I can see, to me, this made sense, knowing that this is just a transition plan, but what is the thought moving forward?
Speaking of my soul, Mike.
Yeah, so, yeah, Jody and Derek, just like their ears just piped up. I can know she's online, like, so excited. One of the things, you know, we talk about like efficiencies, like government efficiencies, and I know you guys love reading every individual boilerplate summary document and implementation plan that we have, like mind numbing. And so we're really looking at some other states and how they do their implementation planning as we go into these new implementation plans, as we come up with the Forest Management Plan and HCP, to looking at alternative ways to present information. We are really, at least on our team, and this hasn't gone much further than that because it's still just kind of ideas. Our goal is to have it where everything, if it's the same, it's one document. And so kind of like in a division level roll up of here are kind of the main topics that we're going to use and the linkages to the Forest Management Plan and to the Habitat Conservation Plan, to the Carbon Plan, to all the different plans that we have to connect to. And then having kind of district appendixes to that with all the pertinent information that is specific to that district and to the REI program. And that way, because we've got some robust reporting that we've got to figure out. And so it's, you know, at the AOP level, at the district level, or at the program level, how do you roll that up to the goals and strategies that are in the F&P, to the monitoring and reporting requirements that are in the HCP and the other reporting that we do, and making sure that there's a thread that goes down through kind of each district, so that way it all is nested in to those goals and strategies that we have. And so it's gonna look different. It's gonna feel different. We're looking at, you know, technology is, you know, always great. Especially because one of the things we really struggle with is those connections of why we're doing it. So we're having to write more and more in our pre-operations reports because they're not looking at the summary document. Or we're having to write more in our summary document because they're not looking at the implementation plan. And so how do we do that better? So these are kind of some of the ideas that we're passing around, and that will start to come to fruition. And frankly, some of the questions we're going to be bringing to this group as we develop kind of this new process. So we've got to get this implementation plan in place so we can do that work. And then turning kind of our attention to that bigger one as we work through finalizing the forest management plan and the draft HCP.
And just to kind of follow up on that, I mean, the implementation plans historically were written with the idea that people would be looking at them at a single district type of thing, not necessarily across every district. And then as we've been doing these implementation plans across all the districts at the same time, we're really seeing where we're trying to say the same thing. And then, you know, I fully understand how difficult it is if you're reading 7 of them, that you're going through and saying, well, this one has a period in a different spot. So does that mean it's a different thing? Like, are they going to do a different thing here than what they said over here? Like, they used a slightly different word. So does that mean it's a different strategy? And, you know, a lot of the effort that we've been doing is to try to make sure it's all the same words, because a lot of each individual implementation plan was written by a different author in the past. And so they were all written just with a slightly different tone. And even if they meant to say the same thing, it's very difficult to tell that, especially when they're the same. And so we've been trying to get them more in alignment, but it is very difficult when you're reading through a bunch of them to find the sentence that is different. And so if there is something in, you know, Astoria's plan around closing a road, good luck finding it, you know, if you're going through all of them, because it's just it's hard to pull that sentence out. And so that's what we've been trying to go through, is what is the best way of, you know, here's the boilerplate, this is the part that's the same for everybody that talks about our strategies. And then how do we tease out that one thing that is unique? Like, how do we pull out, this is the research area that we have in Forest Grove that is not present in Tillamook. And so how do we do that so that somebody reviewing these can zoom to the parts that are different, rather than having to go through the entire document and hopefully memorize every sentence that's potentially different between the two. So I'm aware of your pain, Mike.
All fun stuff. So do you have a initiative to make that kind of change for the next reporting?
Oh, no. I have like a mind map that has a lot of like arrows and sticky notes and we're just in the like formulating phase. Yeah, total storming phase.
You guys, this is the first time I'm hearing this, Barry.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to think through that process myself.
Yeah.
There's some washouts and efficiencies.
Yeah, and there's nothing written down on paper. You just ask the right question at the right moment of, we are just brainstorming how we could look at these different going forward, especially through kind of the reporting lens that we have to do. That was something that we've struggled with the FMP and the IPs and the AOPs is that role. And that's something that we've just been talking about kind of in our shop. And like I said, just in planning of how we might do that differently. So a lot of work to do on that. It's just some sticky notes in my office at this point.
Are you also like how we schedule harvest? Is that part of your question too?
No, it just is, you're transitioning here and like you've started from my perspective, you've started the transition, right? In terms of your landscape design and harvest levels and some of that stuff. And I'm just kind of, I knew that's been a conversation. I just didn't know where that conversation. If we could read in that, well, they're going to stay with district IPs here, or if it's going to go to a forest-wide type thing too. And that, we went to forest-wide things, but that would probably eliminate an IP that Amanda would have to review.
It might just be more streamlined. I still feel like the structure will still be there, but what is the same maybe in, I don't know, we'll get there. What I do know is that we have about 2 years. So the goal kind of with all the timelines that we have is we would be going live with our the brand new implementation plans for FY28. So we're on FY26. So that would be June 30th of 2027 would be the approval of those new implementation plans. And so we have a lot of work in front of us and we know that. But these are all good. It's all good feedback as we begin that process. Kind of like Dan mentioned, I was brainstorming out loud, but there's a lot of internal work we have to do before we'll be ready to kind of collect that feedback externally.
That 28 timeline too assumes the CP stays on track, which we can talk about at some point here, but like a very dynamic situation, right? So that's that was a thought a month ago,
And the one thing I just want to make a note of is we'll be able to keep core business going. That's what these implementation plans do, kind of in the chaos that is going on, kind of on all these other plans that we're working on. This implementation plan just keeps the work that Derek talked about earlier focused and moving forward. If we do new IPs, that's one path. If we stay the course, that's a path. And if we have to change something, we're getting enough experience doing it that we can change pretty quickly within kind of the next cycle of the AOP. So I think that to me, that gives comfort. It's just like core business will continue to go on. We'll still be putting timber sales out. We'll be working under the current IPs that we have until something changes more dramatically while looking towards the future and new processes for implementation planning.
I think for me, a realization that the longer that these transitions take, the more work and the more complex they are. So here we're talking about IPs, which are ideally a 10-year plan. I heard you say how we did this in 23. Now we're doing it in 25. And then in 2 years, we're doing it again. So
we would just extend it because now we've aligned the things. So that was why we didn't align the things in the 23 plan. So there is the option to just extend the implementation plans if it goes past.
So to that end, how much work are you guys expecting when we do have an HCP to then align IPs for the long term, for the 10-year process? Because it seems like you're in a place where there's not hopefully that much massaging that would have to happen. Obviously, all the old FMP stuff is out and then new stuff is there, but it seems like at least all the pieces are sort of there.
I think it's transitioning fully to the language of the new forest management plan, the habitat conservation plan, the new reporting structures that we're going to have, and then the outputs of kind of all the Board of Forestry processes that are still ahead of us. So performance measures, like that's going to dictate some of the reporting and the information that's going to be required in those documents. The direction that they choose, if it's just where we're at now, then it's little change. But if there's additional requirements that are discussed and we're directed to do, then that might change it differently. So.
Yeah, I mean, we have to model a 10-year IP. Built, what will be different is the board's direction on what they want to see, not harvest level, but the approach to managing the forest, particularly outside of HCA.
I think one of the biggest changes that I can see for this next implementation plan, and Colleen talked about it a little bit, but kind of at every cycle that we talk to the general public, we're trying to explain a plan that isn't on the table. And so if it's the AOP, we're trying to explain these are all the things that were already decided in the IPs. If it's the IP, it's what was in the FMPs. And we haven't, our existing documents haven't always done a great job of making a very clear linkage from the top all the way through down to the annual operations plan. And that's really something that we've been looking at pretty tight to show, like, if, the HCP identified stream enhancement, a specific number of stream enhancement, that will end up in the FMP and that'll end up in the IPs. Saying how we're moving towards a 70-year plan in this 10 years, and then each AOP will say how we're moving towards the 10-year plan. And so it's a very clear linkage up. And so when somebody's asking us questions on any of the plans, it's very obvious how each goal either goes down to the AOP level or rolls up to the FMP level commitment that we've had. And so that's a shift from what we've done in the past, which was where sometimes it took some gymnastics to tie the different stages together. And that is a shift that we're going to have to do. That is not how these documents are currently written.
Comment about that. It's one of these old guy moments here, because that's an exact tape recording from SVAC conversations in the past.
I'm so glad you said that. Thank God.
And those linkages were, we had this whole process and we talked about trying to do exactly what you said, and we created those. And what happens, just like if you maintain a web page, those links break because of all the constant evolution and shifting. And so probably the third iteration would be who's the link maintainer, over time.
Yeah, and that's, I've been here for 27 years, so I'm pretty, I've seen that evolution, just like Dan has, just like Derek has, over time. And there's two differences. One is there's some really specific reporting requirements that we have to maintain in the habitat conservation plan that are different, or it's a different level of reporting than we've had to do in the past. So there really isn't an option of not doing it and doing it well. I also think technology has changed a lot, and it's not saying that it won't in the future, but as long as we're committed to that adaptive management process and that stays at the forefront, then I think that this will adapt over time. We've got a planning a team that is really focused on that and will be into the future unless that changes, unless we reorganize again. But I think we're setting up some stopgaps that we didn't necessarily have kind of in the earlier stages or in kind of the middle stages of this implementation plan. That's not a guarantee that those things won't happen, but that will definitely be the next needs No, I'm just joking. But it is something that, you know, as a division, we're going to have to grapple with as we go over time. And that's the point of making it as simple as possible without a lot of extra in there, because that does make it really inefficient.
I also think we've seen the repercussions of it. And so there's a lot of instances where, to be honest, like we've done an awesome job, but we never told anyone. And so we had commitments that we were supposed to do that we blew out of the water. And then we, since we weren't telling people, we were actually, there was the opposite narrative out there that we were doing a bad job on stuff, and we just weren't telling our own story. And I think we've seen what happens with that. And so it's, I think, you know, that knowledge kind of gives us a little bit of, like, there's incentive for us to be able to tell this story well. You know, from a personal standpoint, I happen to think we do a pretty good job. And so I want to be able to show people that. And I've often been frustrated when I hear the opposite, and I'm like, well, I know that's not what we're doing, but I don't have the numbers necessarily to back me up. And that's one of the things that I think we can build into the process, so that every year we're telling that story and it's easy for us to point to on how we're doing, because a lot of people don't understand it. Forestry seems simple when you only see a snippet in a paper, but it turns out it's pretty complicated science. And so we have the narrative abilities to be able to tell it. And I think we've seen what happens when we let someone else tell our story.
Yeah. And I think that too, you know, it's not that we've done a bad job in the past, you know, the FMP and the IPs and all of them have served this purpose, and we've done a lot of really good work under the structure. I think we've just learned some things, and we can tweak some things and try to do better as we go forward. And that's really all we can do. It's just do better and adapt as we move on.
I'll say too, and you'll see since we get to the AOP here, that landscape design, the change just under the HCP and then the swap we just did opens up stuff again. And this was always the framework for this HCP, but the rubber's meeting the road now. So we have a lot of adjacency issues. We're harvesting mature stands, et cetera, right?
What do you mean by opens up some things?
Well, so anything that was DFC outside of the HCA is no longer so, right? So it changes where we're looking on the landscape for harvest opportunities. And it forces us into parts of the landscape on some districts over the short term where we may not have gone or where we've been avoiding going. So the adjacency issues in particular, but also some harvest and mature stands. And so just thinking again about, okay, we're about to really run into it here on these issues. And how can we get in front? How can we do better with the process, learning off of last year? But that's just the AOP. And so again, sort of how can the IP set us up better for success around AOPs? Might be a pipe dream, but we have to try.
Anyone online? Have any comments or questions?
Just one quick question to kind of that point on the DFC and HCA. You know, we had a really robust conversation last time we were in this room about that. Have you guys received any comments in the positive or negative on some of that alignment?
No, what I read is what we've gotten so far. Yeah. So I suspect it will come.
Yeah.
But so far, we haven't heard a lot. I think a lot of it will come in the AOP because, you know, as a concept, it makes sense. You know, we all, it's like we've committed to the habitat conservation plan and we're aligning our plans to that. But really where it comes down to is, I don't really want you to harvest this 100-year-old stand. I don't want you to harvest this layered or OFS stand, even though it's, you know, we've done exactly what we said we were going to do. It's we are going to align these plans. But that means in order to let those younger stands grow and get the volume that we need, and we're still working with the stands we have, that we're going to harvest those stands. Or just by nature of where the habitat conservation areas are, on the districts, we are going to be working adjacent to landowners, and a lot of these are these mature stands. So this is going to be a theme that we see, and you'll see kind of just the sheer numbers of them. We're going to see this year after year after year. And so this is the start of this journey, I think, of like, how do we do this better and what additional things that do we need to do, because we're learning what this plan means on the ground. But it's definitely not the end of the conversation. It's something we're going to have to adapt to over time, because it's just going to continue in the public's, you know, as they realize what this looks like in implementation.
Yeah, and I think that's where, you know, going all the way back to some of the comments that Barrett made earlier, having that aligned messaging from the very top of the organization through, you know, to the field level around why it's okay to cut large trees, that there's species that need diversity of, like, you know, several stages across the entirety of the landscape. And, you know, trees do grow back and trees don't live forever, unlike, you know, some narratives out there. So I think it's the science of forestry is always more difficult to talk about than kind of the opinion or feeling about forests, but it behooves us to have that alignment through the top and have those messages prepared.
A huge responsibility on our part at the top to connect this to greatest permanent value very clearly. And what I mean by that is to help the public understand where we laid the conservation commitments down and then what that creates in terms of trade-offs, or how that then that is the commitment, and thus we're doing other things in other lands, parts of the landscape to meet GPV.
Yeah.
And to maybe to elevate another part of that same argument, to convey a sense of confidence in the conservation performance behind this as well. And so it's not necessarily just about GPV, which of course it's my thing, and it's not just about stabilizing the economics. So there's this vast army of negotiations and team players trying to create a high-performing conservation machine. This is part of that. On the ground, it's going to look like change to people, and so you're going to have to boost confidence in what's behind it on the conservation side.
Yeah. What is the nature of that commitment? Why is it? How is it defensible?
Yeah, and just the size of the negotiating process that has created this. It's not arbitrary.
And I think a lot of inherent challenges with that transition, right? A policy shift, then an operational transition to implementation. We started at highlighting some of the IP level stuff. We're starting to see that in our AOP and our sale lineups, and then up eventually to the communication and the acceptance of that transition. And we did talk as we met to think through the annual plan for SVAC of making this a point of the field tour at the next meeting to see it, to dive further in to see it and maybe help with some of the messaging and key messaging there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to that point, you know, one of the things we talked about, so as you kind of listen to, you know, what we just talked about is, you know, the high level and what that looks like on the ground, but how it impacts operations, how it impacts REI, how it impacts road and riparian management. And on the field tour, the plan is to kind of look at examples of those, of where those kind of all of those things meet. So you can see what it really looks like in implementation and talk about like the impacts these different constraints have and kind of the eye of the needle that we're trying to thread through these conversations. We're not going to get this all right. There's so many unknowns. You know, we're learning this plan just along with everybody else. You know, Mothball Hill, I think, and the Davis Ridge sales were just some symptoms of this plan that, you know, various people kind of knew that would happen, but I think collectively it took a little bit more attention for us to go, okay, we may need to pay more attention to that and develop a better process for that. That's going to continue to happen as we implement this plan. We're going to kind of find that out. I think the piece for me is, do we have a process in place to respond and change and adapt to those pressures as they come up? Because what it might be this last year, but it could be wildfire interface next year based on whatever. And we may not be as prepared for that as we were for engagement. So it's kind of learning as we go and making sure we have a solid process internally for adapting to kind of the different types of engagement of the things that people are frustrated about as we move through it.
One quick question, Tony. On the HCP side, I heard there was some possible slippage. So the question that I was wondering is, this might be a Nick, Colleen, or Derek question, or whoever's checking in with the federal services, but where are the federal services with our submitted HCP at? And compared to the other HCPs that are out there, are we still in a position that's favorable compared to those other HCPs with the work they're doing week to week?
Good question. Again, there's sort of like today's answer, and tomorrow's answer might be different, right? Because again, with the things in DC are kind of dynamic. Our last communication with them, they are staffed up. Both services are staffed up and focused on our HCP and not communicating any delays from where we were. Trying to think. Yeah, I mean, as we know today, we're on track still, essentially.
So we were talking about an April, May 2026 ITP.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
is that feeling?
Mike's been saying like it might be July, but we're still thinking like, yes, it's first half, or say, let's call it second quarter of 26 is what they're still communicating to us for tape. I don't know, Mike, you got it? You want to say anything? He's not there.
No, I think you covered it pretty much. We're going to be getting together with them soon, leadership to leadership, to actually map out the timeline. They're going to give us an answer here pretty soon on whether or not they're going to supplement the EIS or move to a final EIS. Moving to a final EIS from the current draft is a shorter process than supplementation, which would be a longer process. Anyway, they're going to make that decision. We're going to meet. We're going to map out the timeline. We'll have more details then. And currently, they're not hit with capacity issues that we've heard about on either side. I mean, there are people and their staff that have been affected by some of the layoffs and whatnot, but things actually affecting our HCP process, we have not heard about staffing affecting it.
As far as where we are in the pipeline, so the PFA submitted their HCP in front of us. They remain in front of us. And that one's supposed to get wrapped up, they're saying, I think, the end of this year, like September 1st. So they're in front of us. Some of the people on that project are on this one, but we have our own, they have their own staff on our project.
Yeah, let me break in there. The Elliott's in front of us. The PFA is not.
Sorry, I got that switched out. Elliott's in front of us, the PFA is behind it. Okay. Yeah, sorry.
The latest we have on the Elliott, and this is still up in the air, okay, is the Elliott. Well, they thought they'd have ITPs maybe this month. That's not going to be for another few months at least, but not entirely sure on that. The PFA, they haven't officially kicked off with that draft, and they're going back and forth with the services over some stuff around FPA implementation, not with NOAA Fisheries so much, but with Fish and Wildlife Service, and so that's less clear to me when they're really going to be able to start to move.
Thanks, Mike.
Go ahead.
I just have a quick question. I'm just trying to get up to speed here.
Yeah.
So
when we were originally looking at the HCA areas, were we looking at the needs, I guess, or I guess to complement the neighboring properties, whether you're in low-lying foothills and you've got more of a farming community, or if you're adjacent to a watershed or a wilderness area, were we looking at how the state can manage that ground adjacent to the land owners that are outside of its boundaries? Or are we strictly siloed drilling into just state forest land? Because we can do a lot of management adjacent to landowners to complement each side of that property line, right? I mean, did we look at that, or is it?
Not to the extent that, or with the lenses that you're referring to, we did. We looked at it at, sort of our role in any given landscape, but often with biological filters first and operational filters second. Derek did a whole exercise when we were done with the HCAs where he sort of tried to find operational breaks that made sense, particularly with the adjacent landowners.
Doesn't the HCP handbook prohibit consideration of properties outside of the permit area?
And that wasn't what I did when I did it. What I was doing was they had already established, based on the biological goals and objectives, the habitat conservation area boundaries. And then the edits that I did was to go, they were kind of micro edits going around the boundaries themselves and saying, I'll tie this to a road, I'll tie this to a stream, I'll tie this to a ridge.
Yeah, but that's within our own footprint.
Correct.
Right.
But it wasn't
to account broader landscape.
Right. I mean, I guess, yeah, looking, I mean, if you're adjacent to a, low-lying foothills, so you're adjacent to, pathland, I mean, or you're adjacent to a wilderness area that's really, unless something catastrophic happens, it's always going to be there. I mean, we never got that down to that level then?
So
or are we trying to recreate that?
So to Dan's comment, when as part of the HCP Habitat Conservation Plan manuals from the services, you're actually not allowed to consider an adjacent landowner in your strategy. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't want to look at something operationally to see, like, is there a tie-in? But as far as we wouldn't be saying, since we're next to federal ownership, this is the best place to put a habitat conservation area, because we're not allowed to say we're using their habitat to build off of for our own. Instead, you have to use just our own land base. And so there was some considerations like on our side boundaries on like where to draw the line, but at that point in time, like very micro, not should the area be here, but should it be on the left side of the road versus the right side of the road? Moving a boundary 70 feet, not saying whether or not a stand was part of it.
Mike, do you still have a comment? I saw your hand was raised.
I think Derek covered most of it. So more specifically, we could draw our HCAs that way, but we can't take credit for it in the HCP, and the services are not allowed to consider the adjacency, like a landowner's over here also has some objectives, because that could change during the permit term and there's no control over that. So they're not allowed to consider that for benefits to the species. However, I would say probably the main place that we were able to take advantage of things like that or recognize adjacency issues and complementary management is with other federal lands on our districts that have some of that, which we already have sort of some mutual boundaries, if you will, there. I mean, we share owl circles, we share mirrorlet management areas, obviously, and some of that patchwork. So in that sense, we designed our HCAs to take advantage of some of that. But in areas where there's mostly private land ownership, we generally speaking did not just because, yeah, the services aren't allowed to consider that as a benefit. And so we can't characterize it that way in the HCP either. There's two things at play. Our HCP has an effects analysis, which is basically the effects to habitat on our ownership. And then there are services biological opinions on effects to the species specifically. And that's where they're not allowed to take anything into consideration that is not certain. If there was another HCP right beside us, they could probably consider those effects. But since there's basically there's not a lot of opportunity for that.
I think as we put, as those HCA's were developed for the covered species, based on where they are in the landscape, it's definitely generally more interior to our districts and leaving kind of our general ground more along the edges. And that's why we're seeing the interactions that we're seeing.
Yeah, on the north coast.
Yeah.
On the southern area, so western lane south, it played out really. We have mostly scattered parcels, smaller parcels. We have 100 something owl sites. Most of them are adjacent. And so we went site by site through there, parcel by parcel, and tried to look at what role we play or don't play in the maintenance of that site. So some of the HCA's, it was like, we're right there and we're holding most of the bag. Those became HCA's. In other cases, it was like, we have a postage stamp on the outskirts of the circle and the feds have most of the habitat. So we didn't commit to that parcel. And we kind of, that's it. So it played out differently between the two areas because our adjacency issues are different. Right. Thank you.
All right, you guys ready to move on to the 26th? Okay. All right, so next I'm going to talk about the FY26 annual operations plan. I'm going to talk a little bit about the changes that have been made, the targets for the FY26, some of the resource considerations. We'll do a little bit of an overview on the recreation projects. And then, like I said, we'll do a little bit more robust discussion for the public engagement. The engagement, I do have some of the landowner resources that we would have in the resource consideration section, but I'm going to do that all at once just so because the flow will be better and I think we'll have to break it up over lunch. So I think that makes the most sense. Okay, so we spoke about this a lot in October. We had talked about kind of the changes that were recommended through public comment. We got kind of a wide range of them. I'm highlighting kind of the big ones. There's a lot of little things that we're doing, but I think the big topics that we're changing or adding to the process is really standardizing the adjacent landowner outreach. There were a lot of questions because folks were looking at the pre-operations report, so like the individual project reports that we have, and not looking at the bigger documents. So they were asking for a lot of clarity in those documents. So we are adding back some information that you would find in the summary document, just so that way, if that's what they're looking at, they have kind of the whole picture. So there's just not the misinformation. So some of that is around wildlife, fish, plant surveys, steep slope protections, the future condition, domestic and municipal water sources, and then planting prescriptions. We're also, just like the implementation plans, now that it is in the implementation plans, once that's approved, we're also going to provide some enhanced linkages to the climate change and carbon plan. We already had some wording in there on how we were implementing it, but this really connects the two better. It was more general wording, but this will connect that too. So hopefully folks will be able to see that. I don't think it will change some of the conversation because I think a lot of that's higher level, but at least we can refer to that language in there and this is how we're doing it. We will be updating the language around the terrestrial and aquatic anchors to align with the IP revisions once those are approved. And it really is to just explain the new current condition. And then we have updated the timber management targets like we talked about earlier, which gets me to this. And I'm going to try to zoom in. I haven't used this before. I don't know if that's going to allow me to do it. It's way too much. All right. So, you know, as you can see here, this is where we kind of highlighted that harvest volume target. So direction to work at the top end of the range. So Astoria is at 52, Forest Grove 47, North Cascade at 10, Tillamook at 52, West Oregon at 10, Western Lane at Bonita is at 10, and then the Western Lane Southwest unit is at that range of 0 to 2.2 that they'll actually be harvesting this year. So they'll have volume in there. So for the Northwest or kind of the Western districts, our target is anywhere from 181 to 183.2. And if you can look at the next line over, we're kind of really close to the top end of that as the sales sit now planned at 182.8. That will be done for the Western districts on about 5,500 acres of regeneration harvest and about 1,000 acres of partial cut. We also have the Klamath Falls or Klamath district. Both they have the Sun Pass Forest and the Gilcrest Forest, and they're going to be harvesting about 3.4 million off of a little over 1,500 acres. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's questions. I haven't provided, one of the things we had done in the past, we stopped doing last year. The numbers are really fluctuating right now. So we're still in our specialist review and we just met with like the whole division yesterday and got a lot of feedback on that. We're still in kind of the numbers generating game where we're aligning with our budget instructions. We're looking at on values and percentage values. And so I'm not providing kind of the overview of project costs and the gross value and net value because those are still in flux. And so we'll be, you know, that will come out once we do send out the AOP document, but we have a lot of changes to work through on those still. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's questions. Go ahead.
I just have a question for those, that Eastern Oregon area. How do you make those pencil?
Don't.
Those don't look
You don't.
like fair winners
Don't.
for me.
So,
Restoration.
yeah. So
this is a different type of contract.
it is, yeah. So actually, and on the Gilcrest, most of those are done by tons. We sell those contracts by the ton, and it's really to get, it's kind of like our early commercial fins almost, where we're getting like a PCT, but we're getting some value out of them. But yeah, they don't pencil. It's for future. It's a pretty young forest.
Yeah. Well, and I've always struggled with that. That's part of the GPV conversation. That's not enough wood to pay for the fire bill.
Yeah.
You know, so there was an intent to get the Gilchrist for broader reasons, than just economic return. And that's reflecting on how those parcels were obtained. As an agency, we should be championing that kind of work. And again, rolling it back into a legislative concept for some sort of relief. You know, because RD's charging us $8 an acre for fire protection on that thing because we're paying full boat with no GF offset.
Yep.
There's some places there. I mean, we're doing the Lord's work there, but we're not getting paid for it, and it's costing an arm and a leg.
Yep.
Well, just thinking like, are there opportunities to offset those restoration costs with funds that you guys could obtain through some of the mitigation programs?
Yeah, we do take advantage of what we've done a lot of work over the last couple of years through some of the mitigation grants that have been out there. I would have to look to see if these ones specific are. I haven't actually read the summary document for this one yet, so that's something I can check on.
And again, thinking about what everybody in this room that isn't an ODF staff person can do is that those programs are not funded in the GRB. So how do we advocate for that work through state forests, kind of in connection with that financial need? So anyways, just trying to think through kind of how we support that. You know, it's needed work. There's a lot of restoration need over there, but how do we not have that also be a pull or a drain on the program that is doing all the other work on the west side? So
Yeah. Sun Pass is a little different. It's a, it's a mixed conifer forest, with some high value or, decent value trees in there. We can break even or make a little money if the sales are planned, right? Again, though, both of like our efforts on the east side are really, and we tell them they try hard to break even and we tell them they don't have to. Because we're providing a service over there is really what we're doing. And the forest itself looks fantastic. We've reduced fire risk. We've arguably provided some protection to Crater Lake in doing so. So we're immediately adjacent. And those logs go to local mills, local-ish. So those are the services we're providing. The public doesn't know that we do so at a loss, essentially.
Do you do any work on those forests through the conservation and youth corps programs too, that kind of are in that part of the world?
A little bit. There's the Klamath Institute is right there at the base of Sunpass. They have a outdoor ed school. That's about it. But they use Sunpass and the adjacent Forest Service land for their programs.
That's, I mean, I guess connected to that a little bit in my role as a chair of the board of trustees with the State Forests Trust of Oregon. And we're trying to support recreation and all of the department's recreation, education, interpretation activities on state forest. And so we've got this Gilchrist down there. What's it good for? It's not going to be a tree farm, so it could be a recreation resource down there. But, those districts don't have recreation staff, and so, elevating the understanding of the asset, why the department has it. What is it suited for? Is there a recreation opportunity spectrum for that community, the equestrian community? Some others are starting to use that. If we go out and promote it and talk about it, the poor staff down there is shorthanded and sending staff from here down there for a day trip to go clean a toilet or fix a bench. Not efficient. So the better the value of that land is understood. Conversations with the budget or some other structure for
I can't tell who all is in this room. Can you guys hear me? Hi, Lisa.
I think all of us are okay. I think it's just Forest Grove.
Yeah, I
Thank
can hear
you.
you. I can hear you fine.
I think we lost.
It could have been that my headphone died, so I was just checking.
No. We've been lost, set a sail.
You guys back.
Saying Board of School Land, our AO goal.
Frozen.
Low 40s on the stands. It's just depends on the stands. All over.
Hear me?
Some of them were for the
If you guys.
those didn't necessarily.
Hey, Colleen, sounds like you're cutting in and
Yeah.
out.
We're trying to hack. Wi-Fi is not tight. Lunch, let's get the technology up and running. There's pizza. It's not here. So for the phone line, we're Go ahead and go left. We're gonna try to get up and running. What time do you want them?
Let's, and like, how,
Uh,
let's do 12:20.
Okay. I'll throw this in the chat as well, but we're gonna go ahead and try to get line around 20. We are hopeful to have it up and running. Thanks.
Thanks, Colleen.
Good job, good job.